Hello, I'm George Gonzalez, and today is Multiplayer Monday. I'm a VR game developer. I am here to teach you how to make games, and today specifically multiplayer games. I'm going to be showing you exactly what I'm working on, and I'm going to show you these features from a working game instead of an empty scene. And we're going to go over everything you need to know about scene transitions with Fusion. And at the end of the video, I'm going to go over tips on how to debug multiplayer game scene transitions so that it's not a pain for you. So even if you're not using Fusion, a lot of the things here will give you an idea of why I chose Fusion and how to debug multiplayer games. You always need at least 2 builds, or what you can do is create multiple peers in the game. But with VR, because of the tracking, I need to be able to work from the build. Okay, so let me show you what I'm talking about. Okay, I'm gonna show you what I mean. This is probably the most complex version of the scene transitions, is that you have multiple shared lobbies, or you're going between different multiplayer scenes. Let me show you with this guy. So right now, I'm in the other room here, waiting for the other player. And when I go over, I'll be able to see him on the other side. So as you can see, I'm here, and you can see, and we can keep playing together. The idea with this is that we're going to have a world where you can move around and transition without having to worry about seeing your friends or not. And we're going to talk about the setup. As you can see, there's me and him. It's working. And I can go back to the other room that we came from, and it'll be just like the real world, right? When you go in between scenes and you see your friends, hey, what's up? And if you want to party up, you can. So we're going to go over all these details right now. The first thing we're going to talk about is what do you do with different scene transitions? Because your game might be different. You might not be doing the same thing, but you're going to want to know how to adjust it, how to change it. So first things first, we're going to go through the meat of scene transitions in Fusion. If you are struggling, you don't know how to start with Fusion, I will link a video on YouTube. It'll be somewhere in the screen. You can click there, and it shows you how to make a multiplayer game with just 3 scripts. And one of those scripts is this start game. Okay, so if you are going from a multiplayer scene, from a single player scene like a Unity scene to a multiplayer scene, you want to use just this. You don't need much. So like Call of Duty, League of Legends, where you just matchmake, you just use this feature. You don't need to do anything else outside of this. Maybe a recorder stuff, but for the most part, you can have a prefab. Like I'll show in that video, I show you. I have a prefab in here. I turn it on, activate it, and do the scene transition. Fusion will do the scene transition for you. Okay, so that's from non-network to network. Now, let's say you want to go from a network scene back to the non-network scene. So what do you do? So the only thing you need different is you need this connection to the runner, and you do runner.shutdown. So if you grab the prefab, you call this function shutdown, it will shut down the game for you. Okay, and not like shut down the application. It will disconnect you from the game, and you can do a Unity scene transition like normal. So that's the only time you really use Unity scene transition, if you're trying to get out of the multiplayer aspect. But there's some cool features that Fusion has that we're going to start talking about, and how you can adjust each piece of the puzzle when moving into games, like matchmaking, partying up, and making sure everything is transitioning okay. Okay, so we're going to dive deep into this. This is the meat. This is how everything connects. And I'm going to explain this so that it's not a mystery. So in here, we have another thing that I'm not using right now, is a session name. If you wanted to do private lobbies where I decide what the lobby is called, you could do this, where you say, I'm going to play a game called George's Party, right? Or whatever it is. Now, there will be only one server or scene with this session name. And if anyone joins it, they will get put in whatever that scene is, regardless of all these other features. And you also can't, even if you set this to true, it won't create another one. It's mainly so that everyone goes to that same party. So the moment this max client happens, let's say you do a specific scene, it will match people there until this is full. So when it's full, like let's say you have 8 at George's party, only 8 people can join. After that, it'll kick them out. It'll not allow them to come in. And the reason, this is very specific. The session name trumps everything. because it's basically the server name, and so you can't have multiple server names to the same name. So this, if you wanted like 2 different parties, you would have to add 1 and then add 2 and add 3 yourself manually. And so if you want unlimited servers on one game mode, you just take this out, and Fusion will do it for you. They'll add a randomized like 6-string generator, and so it'll be very unique. Okay, so that's the first thing. So if you wanted a private game, you do that. Now, if you the game mode, let's start. This one is a big one because it will save you hours of work. Okay, this is one of the reasons why Fusion is, well, one of the things I like about Fusion is this game mode is for all these features. So if you wanted to make a host and client game, right, host to client, or a shared, this is how you do it. You can also do a server, and the last thing, this is a huge winner for Photon. Single means in single player. This feature means that you'll be playing on your platform, on your console, whatever it is, alone, single player. You don't waste any bandwidth. You don't connect to the Photon servers. It makes all the network code work as a single player without wasting bandwidth. So if you had a player that either didn't have internet connection or wanted to play the whole game single player, you can do that with this. That's all you have to do. You don't have to change anything. All the network code will work with this feature. The only thing that might not work is if you have specific features that you need 2 players for. But for the most part, you can have a tutorial with all the multiplayer enemies. You don't have to make specific one-offs for the tutorial. You don't have to do specific scenarios for single player. It makes it so much easier and save you hours of work because all the multiplayer code works in single player. It's huge. So if I have this in here, because eventually I will have an option for the player if they want to play single player, they're like sick of screaming kids or something, they can play single player or they can have a party. So let's talk about the other one because that's what's coming next. Is the session properties. This is what determines the matchmaking with the players. You want to have a party ID. So let's say, kind of like Pokemon Go, you have 2222 as a code for the room. Obviously, you don't want to choose something that everyone will join because then they'll accidentally join your group. But what this does is that I have it in here, a party ID. So I leave it empty by default. So by default, it's empty. And then I have the scene index because there's a bug that I have to look into. But for now, I had to do this to make it work. Because what it was doing is, let's say I didn't have the scene index, because this was empty, it would automatically change my scene to whatever scene the other room was in. So I had to add this for now, but I will test thoroughly. And for right now, it's working. So what happens is, let's say in my game, I'm going between multiplayer scenes. So let's say my party's 3333. If anyone has their party code 3333, it's not going to shove them into my game because there's a scene index. But if they're in the same scene and the same party, we will be together. So we can hop from scene to scene. And if we have the same party, we will pass by each other if we've had the same party code, which is pretty cool because I can keep that party ID throughout the whole game, right? So we can see each other as we hop in and out of games, and it'll keep us together. Okay? And the cool thing with this party and scene index is that, let's say there's 1,000 players with the room code 222222. All those players can see each other throughout the game. It will create multiple rooms. It will keep spinning rooms. So as long as there's no session name in here, Fusion will continually create more sessions or rooms because they have a different unique ID for the room in here. And Fusion's creating it. Okay, so that's why there's a difference between private servers and room codes. Okay, room codes you can have infinite amount of, but if you make the room code less guessable, then it's going to feel like a private server. So that's a feature. So those are really good options that you can switch, because oftentimes you'll probably see a lot of samples, and I want to show you in Fusion, you'll have different samples in here that you can go in, documentation, in the tutorial, technical samples. There's a lot of different host migration, disconnect, reconnect, social hub. This is the one that I've used for mine. In this example, they go over host and share mode, and it's not VR. So I had to adapt it. But this is a good example that you can go over and download this version to test it out and see. They have a lot of cool samples that help you get started. So with that, we have the session properties. Now this enable client creation. So this is if you want the client to allow to make a new game. So if I'm joining and the room is full, can I create another room? Yes. And as long as there's no name in here, it will let you. So what will happen is, if you have a session name, and let's talk about the edge cases, right? So party. So let's say this is there. There will only be one server with a name party. And sorry, I'm not very familiar with what sessions I want to be, because I think if I say server, it'll make sense to you. There's only one server that can be the same name. So if it gets max clients and this is set to true, it will try to make a new game, but it'll make the same name, and Fusion will say you're not allowed to do that. You can't. There's already a server name party, and so it'll kick you out regardless. But I just want to make sure that some of these you might say, well, I'm trying to tell it to make a new server. No, but it's already made, so you can't. That's why it's if you're just partying out people, the best way to do it is without a session name. Okay, and we'll talk about a little bit about reconnect later, but just know that that's there. And scene info. This is information about which scene to load, which is buggy at the moment because even though I had this, it seemed like the results was that it would push me to it would be override by this. So if this was the same, it wouldn't care what the scene info. At least from what I was testing, I need to do more thorough test with these parameters because there's a lot of mix and match, and I want to show you what actually works because I'm trying to save you time because it can be a huge headache to try to set this up on your own and not know how to do what you want to do. Player count, this is obvious, the max amount of people that can join. You can set it to whatever. If you have more than 20, you have to ask Fusion for permission. But I would advise, unless you have a lot of money or you're not worried about money, the more players you have, the more bandwidth you will use for your server. Because every time you have to multiply by the amount of people that you have to relay the information. So if you have 8 players, that player is sending information to 7 others. And also, like, it depends how far they go. So from US to outside to Europe and to other places, it's even more expensive than if you have people in Europe from Europe sending to each other and people from the US sending to US, and the same with other countries. And it's not per country, but it's per region. And so you have to be aware of those things. So like, yeah, you can have everyone come join the same server, but they'll be lagging and it will be multiplied by the amount of people in the room. So if you have a 20 player room, that's 1 times all the other players, and then you do it around 20 times. So it's that one person to all the others, and then every single person has to do the same thing. Okay, they're all relaying information. So it's easy to code, but you gotta be aware of that. On game started. So this is if you want to initialize something, because oftentimes when you start a game, you can't rely on the mono behavior start. If I go in here and I don't think this awake method, because this is a mono behavior, but the other network objects will not start on start. They have a on spawn. And this is another way that you can initialize things, knowing that things are ready for network operations. And so it's just a nice feature that when the games get started, you can initialize it and you can create something that you can attach to it in here. So that's a good feature if you want to get more, detail about what you're doing when the game starts. And then this scene manager, you just have to know that you use the network default. But if you wanted to extend this class and do something more, you can with the scene manager. If you wanted to do more additive scene loading, whatnot, this is a component that you can look in and see what they have and try to implement on your own. But for default, it works. And this is what transitions everything in the game. And so you don't have to call Unity to sync up scenes and whatnot. This will do it for you. Also, if in a host client game mode or in even a share mode, if I'm the master client and I decide we're in a lobby and we want to go play a game together, I can just use this runner to say go to this scene or make active scene. So in here, you can load scene. So as the manager, you can create a scene reference. So in here we have a scene info if we wanted to, and the parameters if you had specific parameters in here. But if you needed to, what you can do is load the scene with this parameters in here. So like you can have scene index, and what this will do when the master does it, the master client, you don't want everyone to do it, just one person. They do it, and this will trigger a load for everybody in the game, and it will move everyone together to the next scene. Okay, so if you needed to do something like that, you could. The other thing that we could do, some of the last few things that you could do with the runner that I want to go into so that you have an idea. So anytime you want to grab the session information, you do this. You have the runner, the scene session info, and if you have a network behavior, you can always grab the runner. This is not a network behavior. This is a mono behavior, and that's why I have these containers. Those come from the example. These containers have a connection callback, connection data. This has a runner, so I can access that. Connection data is just a scriptable object that has information about the scene that I'm trying to. It's a single player. Does it have a party ID? And this is a way for me to keep track of what's going on. network runner, there's the runner, so I can access it again. And these are callbacks, like if I need it specifically, like on room shutdown, I can use that. Okay. So that's how I access information in here. And this guy's the guy, connection manager is it's an instance, it's a singleton, so that I can access it from anywhere. And I can just connect to any room. And I just feed it the connection data in here. And I'll show you why I do that in a second. I just want to go over these specifics. So session info. This gives you like the name of the room. Oh, hold on. Name. Yes. Okay. You can also get player count. The name is that random ID generated. And so you can, if you wanted to rejoin the game and reconnect, you can use this to store. If the player disconnects, you can store this information so that you can use it later to actually connect to that same room. So let's talk about that, because we have, let's say you disconnect, okay? In here, on connection failed, or if you have on runner shutdown, if something went down, okay, this is going to save you time. This is something that, regardless of what you do with any network solution, you have to figure out how to check the disconnections or the shutdown, because you're going to try to reconnect. With Fusion, it's nice they have these, but I wasn't aware of these. And these three are usually done when you actually, the player cancels, or for some reason they just disconnected. Usually when we shut down the servers, and here you see, let's say I'm leaving to go back to the single player scene and I use a Unity scene transition. Well, let's say I shut it down because I don't want to be connected to the previous room. So I shut it down. This shutdown will trigger this, because it's in here. Sorry for all the scrolling. But in here, I have this callback. I add the callbacks to the connection. And I say, okay, on connection shutdown, on action, when the runner shuts down, do this. Okay, so when the runner shuts down, it goes through this. And if I don't return from these logics, it will try, in my case, to reconnect. Okay, and oftentimes when you shut down, you can say the purpose. So these are similar purposes. These all happen because the user disconnected. Whether it's not really the user, but you as a developer, you put in a logic to shut down the server for that player. So they disconnected. It doesn't shut down the game for the other players. It's just when the player needs to leave. So these are three things that I put in here by default as a return, because I don't care about why this happened, but you could do a printout and you could do different things depending on what happened. And you can, there's a lot of other things that you can look in here as to the reasons. Okay, but be aware that those are there and you can do what you want. For mine, for VR, because it's a huge thing, connection timeout is the one that I'm more that I care about. And this is not the best solution, because ideally, when the player leaves with a headset, like they'll take off the headset and they'll go do something else. In the background, I have a running background thing. If you have the app to run in the background, which usually you do for multiplayer games, what happens is that the game is constantly running in your headset, even if you're gone. But if you keep running network logic through that, it'll burn the battery. And it's what you want to do is just not execute any network code, because you can't. It's like you going AFK. And what happens with AFK, usually in League of Legends or other mobile games, the player is taken control by AI and it's a bot in the game. And the servers do that and control that. And then when the player comes back, then they are allowed to return and maybe given a punishment or something, or maybe the game ended and they're told. You can do that on application pause, on focus on, like there's things, callbacks that you can check for. And then when the player comes back, then you say, okay, you can figure out, okay, did the player disconnect? If the player disconnected, we need to do a pop-up and say, hey, your connection timed out. You want to try to rejoin the game. And that's where you can do the session info name to make him go to the exact same server with the exact same settings or whatever. So this is really good for reconnecting, and we'll do another video in the future about reconnection, and I'll have this all set up, because I want to make sure to save you time and actually tell you everything that I've done based on experience and a working solution. But in here, or anywhere in here, I can do current connection dot runner. And when you have the runner, you have that session info. Okay, there's some things that you can do for setting up a game. Let's say you just started the game, you have the players, you don't want to allow new players in. For example, let's say the party, you have a game, you have 5 players max, all 5 players join. But let's say a player leaves or accidentally goes AFK. You could set this to is open, false, so that no one joins again. The only problem is that person won't be able to join the game because the server is locked down. Now, if you wanted that person to be able to to rejoin, but not allow new players in, there's another way to do that. And that's why we're doing this. Is visible. So is visible can be set to false. And what happens is when you set this to true, it keeps it open. But if you put it to is visible off, let me go up again. So when you set this to is visible false, it means that this random algorithm this algorithm for matchmaking won't take into account that server. So that server is basically put away from the list of accessible servers, which is super nice because Fusion does all this on the back end and you don't have to worry about it. Other solutions, I know I tried Unity and Normcore. At least when I tried years ago, Normcore was not as robust as I wanted it to be with the scene transitions and whatnot. It is a lot better. I've heard that it's a lot better now. I'd be interested to try it out and see. But right now, Fusion is ahead of most network solutions because they've already done it so many times and they're iterating constantly and making it way better. And so they do a lot of things for you in the background. Unity netcode for game objects is nice. They have samples, but they still lack a lot of the features that Fusion has. For example, if you want to do a host migration, a master client, there has a lot of stuff. For example, in shared mode, and this would be the same to relay in Unity. Share mode allows you to have a master client and allows you to share data between, so you don't have to wait for a host to give you the information. So that way it takes a lot of the lag out of the game. There's still some, but it's really nice. And if the master client leaves, it just assigns it to another person. It does it all for you. So like you just have to be aware of what's going on and how to adjust for it. But these are things that Unity doesn't have by default. You have to do it from the ground up, and it's very tedious. So the things that they're doing with just this, it's hundreds and hundreds of hours that you would have to do in Unity to get it working. So they do a lot of the stuff for you. They save you resources, time, and also money because it's more efficient when they do it. And if you want to do it on your own, they have servers too. But I've done it, and it's months of work to do a headless server. So even if you want to, it's up to you. But this is super doable. Really nice. Okay, so we have is visible, is open. If you ever want to close it, you can close it, and you can change these while the game's going. So if you want to do it halfway through the game, it's up to you. And you can have the master client go into the runner and change the session information. Other than that, that is everything. You can also get the max player count. You can change that. You can also, the name, you can't change that, but you can like check the player count. This is a good one usually for when you're trying to figure out, okay, like, are we ready to start the game? Do we have enough players? Or if you want to check, okay, we need all players to be in this area. These are things that you can do. And so now I'm going to share with you how I did the scene transition between different game modes or between different network solutions, because that is very tricky. And I've tried, as you can tell, multiple things in here that I don't need anymore. I had like a previous connection where I like saved the previous one, but I just wanted to trim it down to what actually was working. Okay. And you can see that I was debugging a lot. I was trying it because I had to go back in and I had to work a specific way. And so what do I do with this? How do I connect? So we have this connection data that I show you. It's a scriptable object with the information that we need. Okay, here. These are, I'm going to show you in here. So we have the different scenes, the rooms. I have regions, and for each one, I have a scriptable object that has the name if I need it, max client, scene index. And so the nice thing is that you can do different game modes with different max player count. Okay. And then I haven't implemented the single player thing. It might not stay in here, might be as a reference to the player, because a player, it's an option for the player. So these two things I might not have in here. I might have a reference to a data type, scriptable object, that the player changes or adapts as they change their settings in the menu, if they want to jump into single player or if they disconnect and they don't have internet. Okay, so that's the connection data. We just check if the current connection is running to say, hey, is there a network running? If so, we just shut it down. So that way we don't have complications. I know that it's possible to have multiple runners running at once, and you can have a previous connection, and that can work. But for now, for this sample, to make it so much simpler, I trimmed it down to what is the simplest way to connect from network scene to network scene. And this works. You just saw it in action. And you notice that this is used 7 different times, and it's going to be used like 100 times because I'm going to reuse this for every scene transition. So I don't have to like redo it every time. I just need to put from what scene to what scene and what parameters do I need. So it makes it really efficient, because once it works, it's going to work for every scene that I have. I don't have to redo it. It's work that I don't have to redo. We have the current connection. This is a container. We always want to initiate it with new data, like as a initializer, just to say, hey, this is a clean default version, so that there's no cached information from the previous one. We run into issues with that, so I just wanted to make sure, okay, we have a new connection, current connection. This is the okay. So now we have the container, like we know what it is. We're trying to connect the dots in here. Then we have an active connection. This is now the data that we bring in. So all this before is just prep work to make sure everything's clean. We're ready to start. We have the connection data. We have the game mode. It's a single. It's a shared. The scene information for what scene we're going to, and then the session properties. And like I said, you can just not have this and it will work fine. But if you're going to add a party, be aware of the scene index. This caused me a lot of troubles because I don't know why, and I have to dig deep into it. But for now, I know this works. I have to make sure the scene index is part of that property session so that the player goes where I want it to, which is that scene ID or the scene index. The runner, this is the prefab that we have in here. Let me show you. We have a runner and voice prefab. And this has both voice connection from Fusion, which is another nice thing that Fusion has, is that it auto connects to the runner. And then we have a recorder. And here we have, let me see if I can show you. And here we have a threshold for the voice. So usually what happens if for voice chat, if you don't want to catch like that little stuff beforehand, you can do like a filter, a threshold for when it starts relaying the information from voice chat, so that if someone like it doesn't catch the dog in the background, maybe unless the dog is super loud, then yeah, it will. But that kind of filters some noise from the background. It's not perfect, but it's nice because then the voice chat is not constantly triggering. So that's the prefab I spawn. I give it a name to make sure I know that it's the same as the scene that I'm going through. This is just for debugging purposes. And then we get the runner and assign it to that value so that we have access to it later on. And then we add the callbacks. This is something that usually when you look at other Photon videos, every time you start a session, you have to put in all the callbacks. You can just do this now if you want, so that you don't have to type in all that information from the connections. This information I'm talking about is all this. Usually you'd have to paste this somewhere within the code and it would look ugly because you already have 100 lines of code and you just started. And then we use that specific call. Now, if you didn't want this, you could just not do the shutdown thing. Like if you don't want to if you're lazy for some reason, you can in here, they have iPlayer joined. They don't have all of them, but they have some of the common ones like iPlayer joined, iPlayer left, that if you wanted to implement, I don't know if they have shutdown. No, they just have shutdown reason. So you have these two interfaces that you can implement, and the reason why they're complaining is because you have to implement it, and if you implement it, it's just basically this when the player leaves. So you can do this in any runner, not here, but in any game mode, you can check for that. So you don't have to have this if you don't need it. But I use it at least for the shutdown reason because in VR is very apparent. And you add the callbacks to that specific runner now that you have it set up, right? Because we have the callbacks. Now we add those callbacks to here. So everything's connected. You're connecting the dots. You set it up. The recorder. I have this because I have another singleton game manager. And this game manager, I mean, I could have it referenced here if I wanted to instead of the game manager. That's totally viable. I just need access to the recorder in case I want to mute the player. Like if the player wants to mute themselves so that other people don't hear, this is how we do it. And we'll do another tutorial with just voice chat. But that is it. Like that's everything. And then once we have that, we can start a new session. And the cool thing about this is that this doesn't shut down for the other players. And this doesn't start the game for other players. That's just for you. And if you have questions, let me know. But I spent a lot of time debugging and that's what I want to talk to you about now. And if you have questions, let me know. I'm happy to answer. But I wanted to talk about debugging scene transitions. How can you become a master at scene transitions on a network solution? First, you have to think about what you want out of this. Like list out, okay, when the player does this, I want it to do this. Now, the hard part is that in your head, even if you've been doing it for a while, you know that you usually get things wrong. But as you do it more often, you'll be aware of what's going on. But as you're starting out, multiplayer games are super difficult for that reason because it just gives you another dimension to look for when debugging. And if you think debugging kinematic objects, UI, animations, and trigger event, Just wait till you do multiplayer, because all those things are exponentially harder now. Not because like the topic is difficult, it's just the way things set up and the way you have to think. So how can I make it easier for you? When you are doing this, if you're doing VR, I often test, but like make a build, and you have to use a scientific process. You have to take out as many variables as you can and narrow it down. Okay, you can't be changing multiple things. You have to put in the work. Okay, there's no like you can't just skip it. You skip it by learning it, but there's no such thing as skipping it with multiplayer. You just learn it. And even like for this scene transition, I spent a lot of time trying to finish it, even though I've done it before. It's just that you always have so many, even if you've done it before. I've done it 3 times already with 3 different titles, and it's not as easy as Photon Pun where you drag and drop. But I see a lot of people struggling even with Pun because they just follow the one tutorial. What I wanted you to learn is the core features and how do you adjust that, because you need to know that information to debug, right? So for example, this thing, I bang my head over and over, and the Discord wasn't very helpful because they can't see your code. It's hard to say, oh, I see your code, that you're probably running into this issue. And so you have to be debugging. I do pop-ups to make sure, or display messages. I do debugs to see what's going on. You see debugs everywhere in here. You can't don't assume anything, and test often and change one variable at a time. Like run through the logic and say, okay, at this point, this should happen. Why is this not happening? And if you're stuck, the other thing I suggest is to try a different approach. Like if you need more players, or that's why I have my community. If you need my help, we can debug with you and help you. That's what I do in endgame devs. That's why I build that, because I know there's things that come up that you can't sometimes foresee, and I want to save developers time. But these are the things that people get paid for, is experience, and the experience is built through these iterations. So what did I do to find this out? I tried going to the Discord, but I was like, what is going on? And so I would remove code, I would add code, like you saw me in here. This is a stripped down version of, and you might not need, for example, to add the callbacks. You don't need to add the callbacks. So if you're having too much time, maybe remove the recorder. So like remove variables. There are things that you don't know about. You don't need any of this callback. You could remove this. Instead of, if you're having problems with instantiating, you can remove this. Okay. I know that I had a lot of problems with Photon voice, and I had to, Fusion has a specific Discord chat for voice chat because it's a whole different beast also within that. And then just strip it down if you can. The other thing is you don't need to instantiate it. You can just go from the runner and say, go to the scene. You could do it more hard-coded so that you have a different connection every time, but you have to make sure you shut down the previous one if you're going to go back to it. So you can have multiple prefabs that you enable and disable if it makes it easier for you to grasp your head around. But you need to be aware of all these variables and what they're doing. And if you don't know what it is, comment it out, figure it out, see what works, how it works, and change it. But I did this so that you can see how to work with it. And I have the previous video. So if you're just going to a one-off scene, right, like Call of Duty, League of Legends, you play a game, you matchmake that game, and that's all you do. And then you go back to the single player. So you only have 2 scene transitions, so you don't have to go crazy. Okay, so that is even easier. What I'm doing here is like the hardest thing you can do, because it's VR, multiplayer, and you're going from social hub to social hub, which technically is what a lot of VR players like, and that's what Meta Horizon does for you. But this gives you complete freedom of what to do specifically. And so I wanted to show you the hardest thing so that you can see how it's done, and you can do the simpler thing too, where it's just a game mode and you're matching people and letting them play. Like Marvel Rivals doesn't do this crazy. You're not going from social hub to social hub. You are going to one game mode, and that's why you play, and then you get kicked back, or you go back into the loop. That is 100 times easier than this. Okay, so that's why I say Marvel Rivals, Marvel Snap, all those games, network-wise, for the most part, are doable. You can do them. The hardest part about Marvel Rivals and other of those games is the art style, making sure everything's clean, balancing the stats, and polishing the network features, because it's PvP. So you need to do a lot of corrections and whatnot. And so the polish of that is hard. But replicating the game, for the most part, it's easy. Like it's just one thing. You matchmake with this. You set the properties for the game mode. You enable rooms to be created, and you can spin up 1,000 games with just this code. And so it's not that hard, but it's hard at the same time because it's a new skill. And every Monday, I'm going to share multiplayer games to help you. And if you need help, I'm here on YouTube. I'm here on School, Endgame Devs. And any question you have, and you have the code here. I'm showing you. This works. I have it on a game. It's running, and you can try the game out too. called Magic Hunters. I will see you on the next video.